Live from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu.
Fallout Day in Washington. Welcome to the Thursday edition as an Inspector General report into Signalgate is made public. And top brass testify on Capitol Hill about the double-tap strike against an alleged drug boat coming out of Venezuela. We'll measure the fallout of both with Bloomberg Pentagon reporter Tony Capaccio, who broke the Watchdog report story yesterday. Insights from Evelyn Farkas at the McCain Institute, and from our political panel, Rick Davis and Jonae Wartel with us for the hour, and it's all after a look at Wall Street. Charlie Pellet back on the case today. He's got the update on the markets live from New York. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there, Joe Mathieu. Choppy session right now. Dow lower, S&P, NASDAQ, they are both higher. Just a couple of minutes ago, we had all three pushing higher. S&P, little changed, up 6 right now. That is a gain of just about 0.1%. Stocks wavering on the brink of a record ahead of next week's Fed decision. The Dow, lower, little change, down 2 points now. NASDAQ up 34 for the NASDAQ Composite Index, a gain of 0.1%. 10-year at 4.09% with the 2-year 3.52%. Spot gold up $14 the ounce, 42.17, up 0.3%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil up 1.4%. WTI 59.77 a barrel, and Bitcoin now down 1.4%, 92,402 on Bitcoin. Goldman Sachs has paused a planned $1.3 billion mortgage bond sale for CyrusOne. That's the data center operator that supports CME Group, after a major outage that hit one of the world's largest derivative exchanges. Goldman Sachs shares, they're higher now, little change, but up by about 0.1%. Meta Platform shares, they are advancing 4% as executives consider budget cuts for the Metaverse Group next year, while bets on a Fed rate reduction next week do remain intact. Right now, we got Meta Platforms. It is advancing by 3.9%. Earnings news, Salesforce.com after earnings up by 3.4%. And earnings after Snowflake, it gave an outlook for operating margin that fell short of analyst estimates. Snowflake right now, it is down by 11.1%. Again, recapping, Dow flat on the day, S&P higher by 0.1%, Bitcoin down 1.5%, 92,344. Balance of Power continues now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, here's your host, Joe Mathieu.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. We'll have more on the markets with Charlie Pellet live from New York in just about 20 minutes time here on Balance of Power as we talk politics here in the nation's capital. Thanks for joining us on the early edition this Thursday on Bloomberg TV and radio, available as well live on YouTube. Search Bloomberg Business News Live. Our conversation ahead with Evelyn Farkas from the McCain Institute as we get our hands on the IG report that Tony Capaccio broke yesterday, our Pentagon reporter, no longer inside the Pentagon, yet somehow making more news than ever. This is the report, the Watchdog report into Signalgate, which, of course, has caused the walls to start closing in a bit around Pete Hegseth. Michael Waltz, the president's former national security advisor, has already been reassigned over this. And what we're learning here is, indeed, troops may have been put at risk when the defense secretary decided to share on Signal, on the app that we're talking about here, some battle plans that were about to unfold over Yemen. We're joined now by the aforementioned Tony Capaccio, Bloomberg Pentagon national security reporter, who has his hands on the report. This is, what, 80-something pages long?
It's 84 pages, yeah.
Yeah. Now, you saw portions of this yesterday. Are we learning more today that we didn't know?
See portions.
Okay.
We were given. We were
someone who did talk to you.
Someone
Understood.
Who saw it gave us and other media. So I don't want to overplay that.
Absolutely. But you're looking at these documents now. How much more of a complete picture do we have?
It's somewhat more complete and somewhat more distressing. Mm-hmm. So it's 84 pages, but not every page is laced with gold. For the viewers here, they want to look at page 25, page 14, basically. Those are the kind of the meat. On page 25, it says the Secretary's communication of non-public DoD information created additional risks to U.S. forces admissions. And the killer quote is in that page. But bottom line is, this showed that the Secretary of War or Defense, whatever you want to call it, was cavalier in his use of this information. This is clearly classified, battle of war, a time on target, F-18s hitting XYZ timeframes. And he sent this stuff out on Signal 2 to 4 hours before the operations began. That was new to me. It's just a very cavalier notion. And then in his very cocky letter to the IG, basically thumbing his nose, saying that no classified information was sent.
Right.
March 25th, he said the same thing. I didn't text war plans to the media. Well, this report, sir, shows that he was not telling the truth.
But it also indicated he had the authority to declassify.
Yeah, he had the authority
so how do we
to declassify.
rationalize these two findings?
The IG thought they were silent on the issue whether he should have declassified or could declassify. But,
okay.
Excuse me. They acknowledged that he was a declassifying authority, but they didn't get into that issue. It was more what he did send out potentially could have caused risk to pilots. The Houthis don't have great electronic warfare capabilities to divine into signal gate, but the possibility was there, and it's clearly his actions potentially put U.S. airmen at risk.
Well, and of course, the reason why we know about this is because a journalist was inadvertently added by Michael Waltz, the former national security advisor. To what extent, then, is Pete Hegseth implicated? Because the chain was already there, right? And there were two different chains. We should be clear about this. One had cabinet officials. The other, he had friends and family on.
Yeah,
right?
the second one they barely discussed, and it was like a blink of an eye. That just wasn't a highlight of the report.
Was that an existing thread before these battle plans were put forth?
What, the first or second?
The one that had the reporter on it, the one that had the Atlantic editor.
My impression was no. He set that up after he got the info. And in fact, the report makes the case that he actually had access to a secure facility. They call it a SCIF.
Yes.
He had access to the facility to send the same material out. But yeah, the point here is that he denied it was classified information. The IG was pretty clear that it was classified information, and that putting it out there created additional risks to U.S. forces and missions. I mean, I'll say
as a point of fact, not could have. Are you reading
that? As a point of fact, yeah. And let me read it. Even though these events did not ultimately occur, the Secretary's actions created a risk to operational security that could have resulted in failed U.S. mission objectives and potential harm to U.S. pilots.
Reading directly from the IG report.
Yeah, that's on page 25.
So I'll read directly from the statement from Senator Roger Wicker, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Quote, "It is clear from the reports that the Secretary acted within his authority to communicate the information in question to other cabinet-level officials." He then goes on to write, "It's clear our senior leaders need more tools available to them to communicate classified information." So nothing to see here.
That was a gentlemanly bop and weave.
Okay.
You know.
But that would be the man to do something about it if there was a problem.
His statement effectively, in my eyes, pretty much deflates this whole issue. I mean, but, you know.
So Signalgate becomes Deflategate. That was for producer James.
There was also a football scandal called Deflategate.
I remember that well. That's what I'm saying. Yes, I unfortunately was there for that.
But the point here is that, you know, while he had the authority to do it, there's a judgment call here. Whether to do it on signaling, it's a judgment issue.
Correct. Whether it is legal, whether it is right, are two different questions.
Right.
Now, let me ask you about the other brick in the wall here, because, you know, we're talking about a potentially difficult day for Pete Hegseth. You've also got top brass, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Admiral who ordered the double tap strike on the boat coming out of Venezuela, testifying today on Capitol Hill. There are questions today, and we'll talk to Evelyn Farkas about this. At what point do these stories combine to create a weight that the SecDef cannot handle?
You know, I don't think
politically speaking,
Tony. I don't think the wake is going to be that big based on this report.
How about what's happening on the Hill today?
It depends on whether the Republicans come out and show some outrage. It can't be all Democrats predictably saying the guy should go. And I don't see the wake. I don't see the wake over the water coming over the ship's side.
Yeah,
I see it maybe pounding against it, but still rocking, but not capsizing.
Just a quick note where I started here. You were excised essentially from the Pentagon by not agreeing to sign this.
Exiled. Excised means I might have been assassinated.
Exiled, we'll go with, fine. Excised, I think kind of well. Listen, you choose the language you want. Would this have come out yesterday if you guys were all still in the building? I feel like reporters like you are getting more news now having left the Pentagon than you might have been getting inside the Pentagon. No,
this definitely would have come out had we been inside. Yeah. It would have been more contentious because we would have gone in their face and say, what about this?
Okay.
What about, and they might have come back more.
You don't think you're getting more scoops than you were before this happened?
I think the scoops are I'm getting about the same.
Interesting.
What we're not getting, though, is access in an emergency.
Right.
If the United States struck Venezuela tonight or tomorrow, we wouldn't be able to run in and get stuff. We could grab, and we'd be dependent on emails and calls, which wouldn't be answered.
Yeah.
And then we'd be all depending on Twitter and their babble from other places.
People love it when you come on the program because you're authentic, and I appreciate you bringing this reporting to us, as always. Tony Capaccio, Bloomberg, Pentagon reporter with us in the flesh here in the studio. We're lucky he's in the Bureau more often now. That was the decision across the river. As we add the voice of Evelyn Farkas, with more today on the testimony and the idea of the legality surrounding this second strike on the same boat with survivors in the water. There's been some illuminating reporting by the New York Times into this, conditions that had been set before this scenario by the Secretary of Defense on how to handle survivors and whether, in fact, they continued to present a threat. President Trump talked about this just yesterday. As a matter of fact, he was in the Oval Office when it came up. Listen to what he said.
We know every route. We know every house. We know where they manufacture this crap. We know where they put it all together. And I think you're going to see it very soon on land also. Yeah, please.
So to be clear, you support the decision to kill survivors after the...
No, I support the decision to knock out the boats. And whoever is piloting those boats, most of them are gone. But whoever are piloting those boats, they're guilty of trying to kill people in our country.
Evelyn Farkas is executive director at the McCain Institute at Arizona State University and has been in the building. She's former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, Eurasia. Evelyn, it's great to see you back on Bloomberg TV and radio. I don't want to turn you into a lawyer here, but there are things like the Geneva Convention, international law, and training that troops go through, and certainly top brass go through when you talked about the general staff and dealing with scenarios like this. What are these senators hearing today from the Admiral who ordered the strike and from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who both say they acted legally?
Well, Joe, thanks again for having me back on again. And I'm only sorry I can't be on with Tony Capaccio, who is one of my favorite journalists going back decades. So, look, unfortunately, we in the public don't yet know exactly what transpired. I do think eventually we'll see the videos and we'll get the full story. But I think we have to step back 1 minute and understand that these operations in and of themselves are likely illegal. The fact that we are conducting these operations on the high seas, the fact that we're calling them war, it doesn't make it war. These are police actions that are resulting in the killing of people we don't even know, targets, who we have been told are drug smugglers, working for kind of a drug terrorist organization. So this is all new legal waters, to use a pun intended, that we are being asked to explore. And I would like to hear from lawyers, frankly. I don't want to hear just from the Admiral. I want to hear from seasoned, judge advocate generals, people who understand the military law. And certainly when it comes to the issue of people who are survivors, who are not piloting the boats, Joe, who are in the water clinging to them for their lives, those people are survivors and they should be given safe passage. So we know that if those were Americans in a war context or in a police context, that we would expect the same from any other actor who comes across them.
We have a literal split screen unfolding live right now in Washington, Evelyn, as President Trump has begun speaking at the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace, as it was renamed just 24 hours ago. He's there with the presidents of Rwanda and the Congo to talk about their arriving at peace. If you're with us on Bloomberg Radio, the backdrop behind the president has big lettering that reads, "Delivering Peace." So with that in mind, Evelyn, reporting by the New York Times today shows that Pete Hegseth approved contingency plans for this very scenario. The military would in fact attempt to rescue survivors if they appeared to be helpless, shipwrecked, or out of what they considered the fight. But it would try to kill them again if they took what the U.S. deemed to be a hostile action, like communicating with suspected cartel members. After the smoke cleared from the September strike, there were two, as you mentioned, survivors clinging to wreckage. One of them radioed for help. Is radioing for help a hostile act?
No, No, we know that from our own service members who explain to us that they have survival kits, and the survival kits include radios to call for help. That is not an act of war. That is an act of survival, if you will. That is a civilian act, if nothing else. So those individuals cannot be killed for radioing for help.
It's really interesting because Admiral Bradley and his legal advisor, according to the Times, concluded that they were attempting to continue their drug run. And they're telling senators today that made the already damaged vessel a legitimate target, Evelyn. What do senators say in response?
Yeah, I mean, I would doubt that will hold up in any kind of court of law. And frankly, I do think that these individuals will be court-martialed at some point or brought before a military court of justice. If not now, then at the end of President Trump's term or some other point in time when Congress can step in more assertively. The reality is we need to make sure that we abide by international law, the United States, that is, because we have service members who are working all over the world every day during peace and obviously during war. Mm-hmm. And we want them to also be given fair treatment and given the protection that the Geneva Conventions gives them.
Huh. You believe Admiral Bradley will be court-martialed or others, Evelyn?
Well, I don't know. Obviously, we have to look and see what how the investigation unfolds. But it does appear, I guess I shouldn't go lean so far forward to say that he definitely will be. But there must be more investigation. Let's just leave it at that. And then someone might have to be held accountable. But there's also an overriding question, as I mentioned, Joe, about the legality under international law of these operations. Mm-hmm. Deeming them war does not make them war.
To begin with, reporting in the Wall Street Journal about a different admiral, Alvin Halsey, who was the head of Southcom, and until now we believe that he had stepped down from his position in some sort of protest over these operations. Evelyn, the Journal is reporting that he was forced out by Pete Hegseth after voicing initial concerns about the legality of these operations. Based on your time in the Pentagon, how unusual is it to see a commander fired from his post or taken off of that post during an ongoing military operation?
Well, it's incredibly rare, Joe. And I will note that when I worked on the Senate Armed Services Committee, I had oversight for the Southern Command as well as the Special Operations Command. So you do not remove your leading commander unless there's real cause. And in this case, the only thing he did was question the legal assessment, it sounds like. I mean, I don't also know the full details on this. And to fire someone for questioning, which really should be the commander's job. I mean, he should be questioning everything to make sure that he's protecting the men and women in uniform who are working and conducting operations under his orders.
As an admiral, can Alvin Halsey speak out about this? Or just in our remaining 30 seconds, Evelyn, will he need to be compelled by Congress to speak publicly?
He likely will. Well, that's a good question. He can speak out as a civilian, certainly. And the only thing that he can't talk about are classified items publicly. But of course, he can speak to the relevant committees in a classified session about all of this.
Be very curious to hear from him at some point here. Evelyn, thank you for walking us through this. It's very helpful. Evelyn Farkas speaking from experience in her time at the Pentagon and, of course, in the United States Senate. She's executive director of the McCain Institute at Arizona State University. We'll assemble our political panel next. Rick Davis and Jonae Wartel are with us today. I'm Joe Mathieu. This is Bloomberg. With one of the most honest polls in America today, you might have heard about it. Google trending topics. They're out with their yearly list. What were we searching about? What was important to you? Interesting to see politics creep into the list in a number of cases here. In some cases, pretty esoteric, actually. But it is honest about what's important to us in America. Charlie Kirk was number one on the top 10 here. The late Charlie Kirk spiking searches like no other story that we saw this year. It is immediately followed by K-pop demon hunters. If you want to humble yourself as an American, continue reading. Number 3, Labubu. That's how you say it, right? Those scary looking toys. followed by iPhone 17. And how about this? Number 5, one big, beautiful bill. I guess that communications effort worked pretty well for the president, followed by Zoran Mamdani, DeepSeek, government shutdown, and in number 10, tariffs. The stories that we talk about every day here on Balance of Power. It's pretty remarkable. As we ask today, with evidence of Congress showing up in the Google yearly search trends here, what is happening in the House of Representatives? If you read the tip sheets this morning, you'd think it was Lord of the Flies, Elise Stefanik and Chip Roy running around the bonfire, calling for the name of the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Indeed, there are some cross currents that are making life very difficult for the Speaker, and in the case of Elise Stefanik now taking a victory lap, criticizing the Speaker, calling him an ineffective leader who is losing control of his conference. But she managed to impact legislation in the form of the NDAA to her benefit. Listen to what the Speaker said when asked about his standoff with Stefanik. She's been attacking him on social media and on television. He was asked about it on Tuesday. Listen.
All of that is false. I don't exactly know why Elise won't just call me. I texted her yesterday. I sent my friend Elise a text last night, and I said, can you find out what the issue was, and I'll help you resolve it. I support her provision. I mean, I would vote for it. I think it's smart. And I'm not sure exactly why it wasn't included. So I don't know why she's frustrated with me. I literally had nothing to do with it, but I'm happy to roll up my sleeves and help her. I want everybody to be successful, and we're going to try to make the bill as best it can be.
Let's assemble our political panel for their thoughts on this. Bloomberg Politics contributor Rick Davis is with us, Republican strategist, partner at Stonecourt Capital, alongside Democratic strategist Jonae Wartel, partner at ARC Initiatives. Great to see you both. Jonae, what does it tell you when the Speaker of the House is talking to his membership, in this case a member of his own conference, through the media saying, I wish you would call me?
Well, look, of course, the GOP is spiraling. They have control of the White House, control of Congress, both chambers, and yet we're in a 2026 election cycle, and the American people are not happy. We're in an affordability crisis. Healthcare is under attack. So now folks like Elise Stefanik want to be out front as being dissenting or expressing discontent with the direction that Congress is taking and their key votes on some of these policies. Now, yes, she could have just picked up the phone or sent a text and reached out to Speaker Johnson, but instead she wanted to be out front as showing that she is not a part of the rank and file of Republicans who have gone along with the Trump administration's policies and the most recent controversial votes that Congress has taken. And so, you know, she's reading the tea leaves here, as are many. We're seeing these Google searches really reflecting that Americans are tuned into politics in a way that they haven't been. Googling the one beautiful bill, understanding what tariffs are, folks are dialed in. And what we're seeing now is that Republicans are trying to figure out ways to show some independence from what has been Donald Trump's real stranglehold on the party.
You know, interesting. It wasn't just this provision in the NDAA, Rick. Stefanik talked to the Wall Street Journal, cited matters ranging from members criticizing Speaker's decision to keep lawmakers in their home districts during the recent government shutdown, to weak showings in special elections, to what she cast as his failure to address the expected jump in health care costs if the party doesn't reach agreement soon with Democrats. And that's going to bring us to the jumping off point here when it comes to the looming health care vote a week from today in the Senate. How many members of the Republican conference is Elise Stefanik speaking for, Rick? Because we know Nancy Mace says she may soon announce her decision to follow Marjorie Taylor Greene out the door in not running for re-election.
Yeah, look, I mean, you don't need to look any further than last week's special election in Tennessee, or this week's special election in Tennessee, where, you know, you lost basically, you know, 10 to 12% of the Republican vote from 2024 to 2025. I mean, it is a big deal. There are 50 House Republicans in districts that Trump won by 10 to 12 to 15% that now are waking up saying, I could lose. And if you lost 50 Republicans in a House, you can forget any initiative legislatively for Donald Trump in the last 2 years of his office. So this is a major political fallout that's occurring both after the elections last year and then this year, and it's got Republicans in a pretty grumpy mood. I mean, and talk about Elise Stefanik. How about the most recent thing? I mean, she got out there beating up Mayor-elect Mondani before his trip to Washington, and then Trump throws her under the bus in a love fest with a socialist. I mean, like, she has made every bet wrong this month, and she's mad about it, and she should be mad about it because the party has become something different than what she had, and Marjorie Taylor Greene read the same tea leaves and is out. And as you point out, there are others like Mace who are running for governor and have other things to do, and maybe I don't want to spend my time getting wasted in Washington for the next year.
Wow. Boy, oh boy. Well, you know, Rick reminds us Stefanik is running for governor here, Jonae, and so we do need to look at her remarks and her posture here through that prism of the campaign. But she went on to say to the Journal, whereas Kevin McCarthy was a political animal, Mike Johnson is a political novice. And boy, does it show, with House Republicans underperforming for the first time in the Trump era. I'm confused, Jonae. I thought Mike Johnson was the golden boy, the only guy who got to deliver at the end for Donald Trump. Kevin McCarthy was fired for doing things that Mike Johnson managed to pull off. How has this changed so quickly?
Well, you said the two magic words, Donald Trump. And one of the reasons why Mike Johnson has been so successful is because Donald Trump, under threat of primary for any lawmaker or congressman who steps out of line, has threatened to primary them. So for the first, 9-10 months of the administration, we saw that no one was stepping out of line. They were voting on unpopular legislation. They were voting against the interests of constituents in their districts. And now those chickens have come home to roost because we're in the 2026 election cycle. So I think that Mike Johnson's effectiveness has really been tied more directly to how much that folks have fallen in line with Donald Trump rather than his own political maneuvering and how he's been able to bring folks together. And now, surprisingly, given that we're in the 2026 election cycle, we see that folks are starting to realize that they're in these vulnerable districts. They, as we mentioned, saw the election results from a few Tuesdays ago and said, wow, a lot of what we've been voting on and what we've been loyal to Donald Trump about has created this affordability crisis for our constituents. They're not happy about healthcare. They're not happy about anything right now. And so we've got to find ways to show some independence. So I think Mike Johnson's real effectiveness has really more so been tied to how strong has the Republican brand been under Trump for the first, few months of this administration.
Interesting. It's a week from today, as I mentioned, that the healthcare vote's supposed to take place in the Senate. That's what John Thune promised. And we are seeing the gears turn a little bit today, Rick. There was a meeting yesterday that included Senator Bill Cassidy representing his plan on the Senate side. Representatives Josh Gottheimer and Jen Kiggins, D&R, were in that meeting as well. They didn't come to a particular agreement, but they're talking. And today, the aforementioned Gottheimer and Kiggins are introducing a framework, their own bipartisan legislation here to reduce health premiums. Is this going to be another case where Mike Johnson gets a vote, something passes in a squeaker, and he's the made man once again?
Well, he hopes so, because right now Republicans are outside of affordability, desperate to do something positive around healthcare. It's pretty clear that we lost the narrative debate around the shutdown over healthcare. Regardless of how you feel about the shutdown writ large, we got on totally the defensive. Republicans did on healthcare, and they're desperate to get back into the game. And so my guess is you have a very high chance that something comes out of the House that the Speaker will try to take a victory lap on, even though his strategy around the shutdown was what put us in this place to begin with. Memories are not that short in the House of Representatives. And as Elise Stefanik said, if an election were held today for a Speaker, no way would this guy get elected. You've got a pretty good mess in the leadership in the House of Representatives, and you kind of hope that they can eke something out on healthcare so that we can get through this year in a better position going into the election cycle than we are at now.
Boy, you got to wonder who could get elected. Great conversation, Rick and Jonae. Thank you so much. Great panel today. Rick Davis, Bloomberg Politics contributor, Stonecourt Capital, and Jonae Wartel, ARC Initiatives. Fascinating insights. We're going to go to the source on this. You're not going to want to leave, because coming up, we'll speak with a member of the Republican conference in the House, Marlin Stutzman, Republican from Indiana's 3rd District, with us on a range of issues, including what we've already talked about here. Remembering as well, he's on the Financial Services Committee as we consider the next Fed chair being announced and how easy it might be for him to be confirmed. This is Bloomberg. As we talk policy and politics here in Washington, I'm Joe Mathieu in the nation's capital, and thank you for spending part of your Thursday with us, with our eyes on Capitol Hill and a looming vote 1 week from today in the United States Senate, at least. John Thune promised that vote, the majority leader, to Democrats as part of the conversation to reopen the government. That vote on health care, whether it extends the current COVID era, subsidies from Obamacare, or is some other type of reform or an entirely different plan to replace it. No one has come to terms on this, but an important development today as a Democrat and a Republican in the House of Representatives drop a bipartisan framework to reduce health premiums. That's Representatives Josh Gottheimer and Jen Kiggins, the D and R respectively, providing potentially some hope to get around this matter and then move on to, or at least continue the work to fund the government past the end of January. Time is tight. If we're following along on our home game here, I think we're below 10 legislative days remaining to get all of this done. And it's where we start our conversation with Congressman Marlin Stutzman, the Republican from Indiana's 3rd District, is with us. And it's great to have you back on the program, Congressman. You've got a couple of important committee assignments for our audience here on Bloomberg as a member of Financial Services and as a member of the Budget Committee. Do you see all the chaos surrounding health care finally being solved in the next week?
Great to be with you, Joe. I don't think we'll get all of the problems solved. I think, what we all are realizing is that the Affordable Care Act isn't as affordable as was promised. And I think that there's a lot of frustration. I was just talking to my brother who runs family businesses for us back home, and he was talking about the cost of health care going up for, smaller, to mid-sized companies. And that's one of the challenges that we've all been facing in this country, is the fact that inflation has definitely affected the economy and the ability to make those raises for employees. My hope is that we've set the table with the big beautiful bill, keeping taxes where they're at and making sure that the regulatory environment is much more affordable, or much more in check, so that way businesses don't have those high cost of accountants and attorneys and consultants to be able to make a profit. So I don't think it's going to happen all in this next week. I always, of course, commend those who want to try to find a solution. I'm always willing to look at anything, but at the end of the day, I think what's really going to matter here is that these subsidies should go directly to the American consumer rather than to the insurance companies. I think the insurance companies have really lost the faith and trust of the American people and don't feel like they're getting their best bang for their buck.
Well, what do you think of this Gottheimer-Kiggins bill, and what are you hearing about it? It would provide, as I understand, a 1-year extension for these subsidies. It would also add new guardrails when it comes to eligibility, cracking down on fraud, and a menu of separate pay-for options, not in the form of subsidies. Is that getting closer to something you might support?
It's going to be tough for me, Joe, I'll be honest, just because I don't have the faith and confidence in the insurance companies either. If we send them the money, they're going to, add it to their bottom line. I would much rather send it to the HSAs, send the money directly to the consumers, let the consumer make the decision on what to do with those funds, because I think that's where the American people feel like, they're getting gypped. Because the money goes through government, the money goes through big corporations, and then what gets left to them at the end of the day isn't enough to cover the bills. And I think that's why, just like the Trump savings account that has got some attention this week, it empowers the American individual. It makes sure that the money gets to them, and then they can decide how those monies would be used. And going through an HSA would give those guardrails to be sure that the funds go to actual health care services provided.
Yeah. Well, with so little agreed upon, Congressman, what's your gut? Are you worried about a shutdown in the new year, or can this be solved by then?
I don't think there will be a shutdown. Again, I think the Democrats, they got what they were looking for to show their base that they were fighting for them. Again, I don't think it comes back down just to these subsidies. I think there's more with the Democrat side that they're just trying to slow the momentum that President Trump had, and it has worked. We're not getting things moving as quickly as we'd like to in Congress, but we're getting there. It's going to happen. I think a lot of the hard work was already done with the big, beautiful bill, making sure that companies are ready to set their budgets for 2026, whether it was last month or this month. But we've got a lot of work to do, and I know that affordability is a big issue, whether it's housing, whether it's buying a new car or buying a used car. Interest rates are coming down a little bit. That's helping. I think the outlook is bright, but we're still going through the leftover, kind of the hangover of the Biden administration.
Well, so talk to us about the budgeting process. You're actually on the budget committee, and there's been talk of something revolutionary happening as the speaker promised regular order, Congressman. I don't mean to get too cute here. I don't think anybody sees 12 separate bills coming together, but we could have a couple of minibus bills, correct, that would help us fund the government past January 30. How close are we to making that happen?
Yeah, well, that's always the goal, and I appreciate Speaker Johnson's leadership. I mean, he has brought the Republican conference a long way in the House with a small majority. It doesn't take too many members to jump off that makes it difficult to pass anything. That's one thing that Republicans need to do, is stick together. We've got a great leader at the White House. We've got partners in the Senate where we're getting stuff done. It's not easy, but at the same time, that should always be the goal, of getting 12 appropriations bills passed. If it doesn't work exactly the way we want it, we've got to be nimble and flexible to be able to put the best packages on the floor that we can. Always going to be some other issues that come up that take attention, but I think we're going to get there, and we know from what we've passed already that we're going to start cutting the expenses that Washington has been doing for the last several decades that just seem to be out of control, and that's where reforms are going to have to be made. But we can do this by empowering the American people and not just empowering the big corporations that take a lot to their bottom line.
I know you're referring to Republican unity in the House, but there have been some concerns about discord in the family, Congressman. Look no further than Elise Stefanik, who has been at odds with Speaker Johnson over a number of issues. Beyond the provision in the NDAA that she planted a flag on, there are questions about more than that, she says. Speaking with the Wall Street Journal, citing matters ranging from members criticizing Speaker's decision to keep lawmakers like yourself home during the shutdown, to weak showings in special elections, to what she cast as his failure to address an expected jump in health care costs, which you and I were just talking about. She went on to say, Kevin McCarthy was a political animal. Mike Johnson is a political novice. And boy, does it show. Is this just a member running for governor, Congressman, or is there more to it in your conference?
Well, no, I mean, this is the first I've actually heard of this. I know there's been a couple of members that have expressed frustration publicly. Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of them. And of course, Elise Stefanik, she was put in a really awkward, difficult spot. Here she thought she was going to be the UN ambassador, and those things didn't work out. And now she's running for governor. I wish we would always keep those conversations inside the family, and especially one-on-one. She should be expressing her frustration with the speaker if it's genuinely real. I mean, that's what we should all be doing. So taking them public, I don't think is the right way. But I have a ton of respect for Elise. She's a great leader. She will be a great governor of New York if that's what she decides she's going to do. Speaker Johnson has a very tough job, and I think that the fact that the shutdown did hurt the momentum that we had. If that's what Democrats wanted, that it probably did help them. But we're going to get back on track. We're going to make sure the NDAA is kind of one of those must-pass bills, and so everybody's jockeying, trying to get their piece of legislation into the NDAA because they know it's going to likely get across the finish line. But Speaker Johnson will navigate all of that. I'm sure he's already, making the phone calls to Elise to say, hey, let's get together and talk and work this out. We really got to stick together as a team.
Ever the diplomat in Marlin Stutzman. Congressman, I've got to ask you about redistricting. There is an effort in your state, a big push and pull, at least in the state legislature when it comes to Indiana. Do you support the effort?
I do, and it's one of those things, again, where these issues come at you and you're like, oh, why do we have to do this? Why are we having to, break the precedent? Well, the problem is, we meet all the time in legislative bodies because something's changed, precedent changed. And so we always are faced with challenges. And I think that it's one of those that the Indiana legislature wasn't expecting. But a lot of this comes back to the politics that I mentioned earlier. The Democrats have been, drawing their maps in states like California, Illinois. Massachusetts is a good example. Massachusetts is as Democrat as Indiana is Republican. And, there's 9 districts in Massachusetts. There's 9 districts in Indiana. Yeah. Every district in Massachusetts is Democrat. It's favored to the Democrats. In Indiana, I think the maps were actually very favorable to the Democrats because there was one district in Indianapolis that it was a true blue Democrat seat. And then, of course, Northwest Indiana was a swing seat, kind of. But we've had a lot of people moving over from Illinois. And, if we're going to play partisan politics, Indiana is a 9-0 state. And so the Republican friends in the state legislature there need to realize we're in a national battle here. This isn't just about Indiana. It's a national battle where we need to be sure that there's equal representation in Washington for Hoosiers.
Wow. Well, a couple of different scenarios that you just outlined there, right? And first of all, California was responding to Texas, which got the ball rolling on this. And some of those other states you mentioned, like Massachusetts, were on schedule with the census, right? The question has been, should every state just go for it right now and hope for the best when it's done? And it looks like that's a yes for Indiana.
Well, it is, but Texas was also forced to do it by the courts, so it wasn't just they decided to do that. That's something that I've checked on several times because I always hear that explanation. California, they actually put it to a vote to the people, and the people overwhelmingly voted, said, hey, we're going to let the legislature go ahead and draw the maps again. So I tell my Indiana colleagues, like, if you put the issue in front of the people of Indiana, they would probably look at it the same way as Californians did, but they just have a different process. They actually have to take it to a vote first with the public. Indiana has a different process. We have a supermajority. I think it needs to be something that needs to get done so that way we can continue to push the conservative agenda forward.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that you might actually bring this to a vote in Indiana. I know Governor Braun had some concerns about this to begin with, but I read what you're saying right now. I have to ask you quickly while you're with us, Congressman, with your post on the Financial Services Committee, about Bloomberg's reporting that Kevin Hassett is leading the charge here and at the top of President Trump's list to be the next Fed chair. Is that a name you would support?
Oh, I hope so. I love Kevin. He's done a great job for the administration already. He's just got a great smile. He's always optimistic. But I think he's also the level head that we need, a steady hand. Between Kevin and Scott Bessent, 2 great folks at the wheel for the American economy. And he's got my vote if there's anybody that is listening.
Well, Scott Bessent might, if this happens, Bloomberg reporting that the White House might give him Hassett's job as well, running the NEC. That gives, I think, Scott Bessent 3 hats. Are you comfortable with that?
Well, he's got a really big one with just the IRS.
I should say so.
Right. Scott is tremendous. I always enjoy our meetings with him on the Budget Committee. He's very thoughtful. He's got a great team around him. He knows how these things work, and I'm sure he'll do whatever he can for the president, ultimately for the American people.
Great. Congressman, come back and talk to us about your INVEST Act next time. We'd like to keep the conversation rolling. Marlin Stutzman, Republican from Indiana's 3rd District, with us live from Capitol Hill. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington. We'll meet you back here on the late edition of Balance of Power. That starts at 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll have a lot more to unpack after an important day in Washington. This is Bloomberg.